Hello and welcome to Temple of Akasha, the home of embodied spirituality with me, Natasha. So today I'd like to talk about what makes a healthy relationship dynamic. And this applies to all relationships: romantic, familial, friendships, even work relationships. The thing that I feel I've extracted in my own experience that allows for healthy, conscious communication, interactions, discussions, interplay between me and other people. And this came to my awareness this morning quite organically. I wasn't planning to film this video. I had a friend send me a voice message, and she's one of my closest sisters. And as I was listening to the way she was speaking in the message and the way that I was responding to her, we were talking about meeting up, and she was saying, you know, she's got plans here and there, and, you know, it's difficult because she has a child. And listening to how robust she was in communicating, look, I'm not available this time, I'm not available this time, I want time for myself on this day, maybe we can make it work tomorrow. But I was just listening to how autonomous and sovereign she was as she spoke. And it got me thinking, what is the commonality in my current relationships that I can share with this audience, with this community, that will be beneficial when it comes to building healthy dynamics? Because I've gone from experiencing an array of dysfunctional relationships, both romantically when I was in my late teens, early 20s especially, to, you know, really unpleasant friendships and sisterhood circles again in those kind of late teens, early 20s years, when I was at university. And when I scan my current experience, my relationships are so beautiful, and I feel so abundant and so well nourished in my connections. And what I've identified is the kind of commonality in all of those things, in the way I interact with my sisters and my family, and the things that have shifted to allow for more harmony, is that I have begun to see, or started to see, those people in my life as individuals. And I've started to see myself as an individual. And I know that that might sound quite obvious at face value, but when we are locked into codependent templates, when we are locked into codependent ways of relating, which most of us are, we don't actually see ourselves and the other as separate in a truly autonomous and sovereign way. And so really, I think what I'm speaking to in this video is the difference between codependency and interdependency. Codependency, which I would say is the most prevalent way of relating on the planet, and it's a very parasitic dynamic, which I'm going to explore in my next video. It's a very parasitic dynamic. Codependency is a way of relating when we feel that we have needs that need to be met from the other, that we can't meet ourselves, and that negatively affects our sense of wholeness. And so it's a reliance and a dependency, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because we're relational creatures and we do need things in relationships and we do need other people. But when we start to need something from those dynamics that we are reliant on to the detriment of our own sense of wholeness, to our own empowerment, it's codependency. Interdependency is an acknowledgement that, yes, I'm a human, I'm a relational creature, relationships are healthy and really support me functioning in, you know, my allness. And I recognize that there is a degree of dependency in relationships, right? We kind of need, especially like co-parenting, for example, when you're parents, you need your partner. You need your partner to be able to kind of hold things together or support you or whatever it is. We need each other. That's normal. But there's a recognition in an interdependent dynamic that I'm still a whole being, and I make the focus of my life sourcing a sense of wholeness from myself, and not outsourcing that responsibility to you. And this is what tends to happen in most dynamics. we will come into relationship from a sense of I'm deficient, I lack something, I'm not enough as I am, and I need to source it from you. And so I feel very strongly that most people are yet to truly awaken to the gnosis that they are actually a whole person, and that the people that they're looking at are other whole people. And when we're codependent with others and we have this kind of dependency that then starts to kind of, we kind of become absorbed almost in the other person's experience and life in a way that makes the boundaries between us and them quite blurry. When that happens, we really start to fall into these spaces of like, who am I without you? And that's very codependent, and it's very parasitic because it's feeding disempowered dynamics and energies of victimhood. And, you know, in its kind of like rawest form, it doesn't actually allow for true empowerment and connections. So what I love about my current relationships with my friends, family, the people in my life, is that there is this ongoing understanding, recognition, at least within me, I can't speak for them, but within me, that person is an individual. They have their own needs, their own desires, their own boundaries, their own values, and that their responsibility is not to me, to making me the center of their universe. Their responsibility is to maintain those things for themselves. My responsibility is to maintain those things for myself. And we find a way of coming together from a place of not necessarily compromise, but co-creation in our relationships. How can I meet you with what I need, and how can you meet me with what you need, and how can we find some middle ground here to come together, spend time together, be in relationship together, share these values together, etc., whilst honoring boundaries and autonomy. And I feel that just a simple switch in relationships of starting to view the people in your life and yourself as a whole being. So I'm going to give a very clear example. This really happens often in our close, intimate relationships, so family or romantic dynamics. When you're in a long-term romantic relationship, you get to know your partner really well, okay? So by the time you're a few years in, as was the case in my last relationship, my ex-partner and I, we were like best friends. So we could probably finish each other's sentences. We knew each other really, really well. Arguably, he could, at that point in my, you know, in that state of awareness, he probably knew me better than I knew me. And in those states, when there's such closeness and intimacy, what can happen is that we can start to view the other as an extension of ourselves. So when my ex would be talking, sometimes it's like you could finish their sentence. I know what he's going to say. He knows what I'm going to say. And what happens when we just almost take our connections for granted in that way? It's like, oh, I already know everything. We go at them with that mindset. I know everything about this person already because we're so close. You know, oh, it doesn't matter that he wants to go to the toilet. I mean, didn't you do this, but I've heard people doing this. You know, their partner wants to go to the toilet and then they just open the door, walk in, brush their teeth. And it's like, yes, you do know your partner really, really well. And can you respect that that's still an autonomous being? So in the example of I could finish someone else's sentence because I already know what he's going to say because I know him so well. What would happen if we were to actually be humble in our connections to say, yes, I do know this being really well, and each moment is a new moment, and each moment we're all evolving, we're all changing, we're all growing. Can we, instead of looking at our relationships with, I already know everything, and therefore it's boring, or therefore it gives me some right to be, you know, almost disrespectful to my partner by finishing their sentences, by assuming I know what they're going to say and how they're going to respond and how they're going to act. Can we look through fresh eyes? Can we look through eyes that see novelty and that see each moment as something new? That person, yeah, I know them, we've been in connection for 3-4 years, whatever, and I know them well, and I also make allowances for the fact that we are all extensions of and pioneers of consciousness, and in each moment that person has the opportunity to grow and enact and embody in ways that they haven't done before, and therefore I'm not familiar with. And I allow that room for growth in this relationship, for that person to evolve, for me to evolve, and for there to be novelty in that. And for each moment to be an opportunity to respect that person as an autonomous being all over again. And to really, rather than seeing them so close, like I could literally see, like, you know, all of you, and I know all of you, can we step back to appreciate the wholeness of the being and really disentangle ourselves from this sense of, it's almost like an entitled energy when we're codependent and we're in intimate relationships where we've really become enmeshed and we don't clearly know ourselves, and we don't clearly kind of see the boundaries, the natural boundaries that need to be established between individuals. It's almost like there's an entitled energy of like, well, I know it all, so I'm entitled to all of that person, and I'm entitled to speak to them the way I want to speak to them because they're an extension of me. This is where it gets parasitic. They're an extension of me, right, at this point in a codependent, through a codependent lens. And therefore, it's kind of like, well, I want to get my needs met, my desires met, my values met, and that's what they're here to do for me. That's what codependent relationships do. When we don't have a healthy sense of individuality, when we don't have a healthy sense of autonomy, when we're stuck in these kind of really blended relationships, we start to see the other as a means to serve ourselves. And that's when they get super toxic and super disruptive and dissonant, when we start to use the other person, whether it's a romantic partner or a friend or a family member, as a means to an end, which is to meet our own needs and feel fulfilled within ourselves. That what we do when we make that assumption that that person there is to meet our needs is that we stop seeing them as an individual. And as I said, we start seeing them as an extension to us. And we see them through a purely self-serving lens, and we stop relating to them from the heart space of that this is an individual with their own needs. And how can I use this relationship, and maybe the ways that I don't feel that my partner meets my needs, for example, how can I use that as a mirror to see where can I be more authentic within my being to meet my own needs for myself, to ask for what I need, to cultivate the courage to speak my needs when I have them and they relate to another person. How can I use this dynamic as a chamber of growth? That's it. My last long-term relationship, my ex and I went into that relationship we made vows to each other. We made vows to one another. I'd been in a 3-year relationship from the age of like 17, like just before my 17th birthday to just before my 21st birthday. And that was, you know, for a young person, that's quite a long relationship. I was at university. I was I was a shit show, you know, suicidal, depressed. It was a bit of a nightmare in my own experience. And that relationship was very volatile. This person was a beautiful person. I'm a beautiful person. And we both had a shitload of wounding. And so it was a very tumultuous, volatile, highs, lows, very... I learned a lot. And so I came out of that relationship with this sense of, I don't ever want to be that person in relationship again. I never want to be the person in relationship again where my partner feels that they can't speak to me honestly about how they're feeling, because that relationship ended really in not a very nice way. There was infidelity, and my partner had, you know, already kind of removed himself from our relationship and was starting to invest in someone else by the time we broke up. And so I left that initially with a lot of anger, and then with a sense of, I don't ever want to be in a relationship like that again, with that level of toxicity. And after I'd got over the initial, like, kind of, you know, flood of rage and anger that filled me when my ex had gone off with someone else, I really used that relationship as a mirror. And I said, like, what did I do? How did I contribute to the breakdown of a relationship that could have been quite beautiful, to the degree that my partner couldn't speak to me clearly about how he was feeling and felt the need to then find comfort elsewhere in someone else? How did it break down to that degree? And that was quite that was quite pivotal and profound as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old making those reflections, because it started an entire process of self-inquiry, of really getting to understand myself, of getting to observe my strategies and mechanisms and how I am when I'm triggered, or how I was when I was triggered, because I respond differently now. And I saw, like, holy shit, you know, it's so easy in situations when there's been like a lot of disharmony and the relationship doesn't end in an amicable way to like point the finger at the other. When you turn that mirror and start reflecting on yourself, that's when you really start to wake up. And I saw all the ways in which I was quite toxic and manipulative in my behavior unknowingly. And this is a discussion I could go into. It's a whole other topic. But the reason I'm bringing that up was that seeded a desire in me to be different. So when my next long-term relationship came round, it was his first proper long-term relationship, and obviously my second long-term relationship. And we both decided that we wanted to create something different together, that we both had a desire to elevate our relationship out of these really like high, low, toxic, polarity-filled dynamics that, and when I say polarity, I don't mean the energetics of masculine and feminine, but I mean like extremes, perhaps duality more than polarity, but just real kind of like opposites where there's just so much friction and so much turbulence. There's not a lot of equanimity in these connections that are really karmic and really fueled by wounding. There tends to be a lot of waves, tumultuous waves. And so we both went into this relationship with a desire for it to be different, to not replicate that. And so we made vows to be honest with each other, to be, you know, speak our truth. But I think what really made that relationship different and what sparked an entirely new way of relating for me in all of my relationships was that we decided in those early days, weeks, months of being together, that we would value our own evolutionary process and the truth that's in our hearts over attachment to that connection. And the reason that that's really fundamental is because in codependent dynamics, we try to hold the relationship together at all costs to ourselves, at all costs to our lives. We might self-sacrifice, compromise our boundaries, ruin other relationships because we are so attached to maintaining this dynamic, however healthy or unhealthy it is. When you decide in a relationship to say, while we are together, I'm going to love you and honor you and be the best that I can in this connection, and I'm still my priority. So my needs, my boundaries, my desires, my values, my 5 pillars of self-love, my need to validate, this is my priority. I'm my priority and responsibility. You're your priority and responsibility. And we will find a way of co-creating something together with those things in mind. That was really fundamental, because it then took the focus away from needing to source a sense of wholeness from him and really made sure that we were in connection, looking to become self-sourced whilst interdependent. Now, that relationship was not perfect. We were both still evolving out of codependent templates. So there was that in there. And we consciously chose to keep moving through them, these kind of codependent ways when they arose, which they did. And I feel that what I learned from that relationship was to truly recognize our individuality and autonomy as individuals in any type of relationship. And if you can view the person in front of you not with a sense of entitlement, like if it's a family member, you've known them all your lives, there's a sense of familiarity there that can really make us feel entitled to know what, you know, I know this person so well, I don't need to respect them, I don't need to hear them as an individual, I don't need to try and understand their point of view. There are so many assumptions made in intimate connections. The way that we can remedy this is by bringing humility and saying, you know what? Yes, I know you incredibly well and I know who you've been up until this point. And I choose to include the soul in this. I choose to include the fact that you are an expansive being embodied in human form, and that you will grow and evolve and change in your own way. And I make room for that in this connection. And I make room for that for myself in this connection too. And if you can be in connections where you make that the focus, that yes, maybe we've got history, or maybe we've got baggage that we're coming into this relationship with, right? Wounding, attachment style trauma, whatever it is. And we're going to choose not to slot together as codependent puzzle pieces that need to use each other as crutches to fill the voids left from those previous wounds, but instead we choose to kind of lean on each other as allies, whilst all the while learning how to be autonomous and walk this path together side by side, instead of really codependently locked together, bonded by karma and attachment and wounding that negatively impacts us and the dynamic. I hope that makes sense. I think that's kind of good imagery. Codependency is like this. Interdependency is more like this, and also really kind of in its healthiest form. It's kind of I suppose, a fluid exchange between this, when we lean on each other, and walking together side by side as autonomous individuals. So if you take anything from this message today, which was quite raw and spontaneous is the word I'm looking for, so I hope it made sense. I keep seeing a lot of repeating numbers at the moment. 111, just saw. If you take anything from this message, especially as we're coming into holiday season, as I film this in real time, I invite you to just consider, what would it be like, play with this, what would it be like if I was to view my mother, father, sibling, cousin, friend, partner, colleague, not based on the history, not based on who I've known them to be. What if I was to view the person standing in front of me right now with fresh eyes, like I've never met this person before, and I'm curious about the way they speak, the language they use, their tonality, and I'm listening to the words that they actually speak, instead of just waiting to respond with my own monologue. What if I was to actually lean in and to be present with the person and the embodiment in front of me right now, not the iteration that I have experienced in the past of them, not who I have mentally and conceptually decided they are, the person right in front of me right now. What if I was to view that person in front of me now with humility and curiosity and novelty? That there will never be an iteration of this person as they stand in front of me right now, because we're always growing, changing, evolving, adapting. And when you bring fresh eyes to your relationships like this, when you choose to show up with a sense of curiosity and investment in possibility, and a sense of humility and heart-based humility, that I don't know everything and I'm curious to know you more deeply, to know the evolving you instead of the you that I've decided you are, that's when you bring magic into your relationships. You are making space, not just for the humanity, which is flawed and which is going to have its stuff, but also for the soul, which is innately expansive and innovative and pioneering in the ways in which it wants to express in this human form. So, breakdown, takeaway, codependency, for me, is the old way that we've been conditioned to relate. New Earth relationships are built on interdependency, a knowingness that we are relational beings, that relationships are a really healthy and important part of our wholeness, actually, and it is really possible to be whole beings in connection with another, and to be able to dance with other people in our lives without having to blend into them, without having to become really enmeshed in them, without having to completely dissolve our boundaries for those connections. And this is not easy work. I believe this is a life's work, to really be able to honor ourselves, our boundaries, our individual sense of empowerment, our truth, our needs in relationship, right? And really honor our authentic expression in relationship and in various dynamics. It takes work, right? It really takes returning to a sense of being self-sourced, of self-love, of tending to our wounds, of tending to our childhood stuff, of creating secure attachments. Okay, and so another way of kind of relating to what I've shared today is that we're looking to create secure attachments and dynamics that allow us to feel safe, that create room in relationships for our authenticity, and that aren't built on just trying to source our needs from another person, because that's very self-serving, and it's really based on and founded on wounding from the past, that instead of addressing directly ourselves, we're trying to band-aid over using that other person. That's not respectful of us, and it's not respectful of them. So actually evolving our relationships means that we have to do this work. It means that we have to start self-sourcing. We have to re-establishing our own unique, authentic connection to the one, to our hearts, to the recognition of who we truly are, the recognition of who that other person truly is, beyond our conditioning, beyond our ideas of them, beyond our perceptions and our historical understanding of them. So when we view relationships through this lens, to me, this is why it's almost like I get so excited about relationships, because there is no end to how magical our relationships can be when we view them through this lens. That we're all evolving beings, that there's no fixed thing. This person isn't one way and they're always going to be this way. Yes, there are people that are so adamant and stubborn in their attachment to an identity. And if we're evolving beings, the chances are we're not going to have that many people like that in our lives. We're going to evolve beyond that frequency. And so if we can really be open to this possibility that the people in our lives are growing, changing, evolving, expansive beings, so am I, there is always going to be new to be found. There is always going to be evolving, innovative and pioneering ways we can relate to one another, pioneering things we want to experience and explore, pioneering desires, because that is the nature of consciousness, always expanding. So that imbues our relationships with a sense of novelty, with a sense of the miraculous, with a sense of the unknown, with mystery. And if we can infuse that mystery, that element of mystery of not knowing everything, right? Imbuing the fact that we are part of a much wider cosmic mystery into these microcosms of our relationships, and saying like, this person is also a mystery, because I think I know them, and yet there's so much more to them that I don't know. If we can imbue the mystery in our relationships, infuse the magic into what we might consider mundane, we have the grounds for longevity in relationships. We have the grounds for true respect, humility, compassion, co-creation in our relationships, collaboration. And to me, these are the templates that we see the new earth evolving paradigm relationships in. So I hope this served in its spontaneity. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, comments, insights maybe that this has provided a mirror with about your own relationships. Lots of relational content to come. I really love this topic. It's one of the things I'm most passionate about. And as an energetic alchemist, it's something I've used relationships probably as one of my most fundamental areas of alchemy to really understand myself better. So I can't wait to share more insights with you in this area soon. Take good care. I'm sending lots of love, and I'll catch you in the next transmission.